So, to really understand this, we need to set the scene. It is shortly after midnight on March 2nd, 2026. The geopolitical temperature in the Middle East has completely boiled over. We are talking about the sudden and dramatic escalation of the U.S.-Israel conflict with Iran, which defense circles are calling Operation Epic Fury.
Right, and the tremors from that are being felt everywhere.
Exactly. But tonight, the front line has moved to a small, fiercely protected pocket of British sovereign territory in the eastern Mediterranean. A Shahed 136 one-way attack drone, suspected to be launched by Iranian-linked militia forces in Lebanon or Iraq, slips through the darkness. It successfully breaches the perimeter of RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, strikes a hangar, and instantly drags the United Kingdom deeper into a rapidly expanding international crisis.
And let us be very clear here. A kinetic strike on a sovereign base area fundamentally rewrites the immediate strategic calculus. We are no longer just observing a regional conflict. We are physically absorbing its overspill.
The situation is incredibly tense. The UK has a legal and historical obligation to ensure the security of Cyprus under the 1960 Treaty of Guarantee. So, following the strike, Prime Minister Keir Starmer addresses the nation on television. He promises a swift, decisive, and overwhelming projection of power to protect British lives and Allied interests. The immediate order is given to scramble one of the most advanced, lethal, and sophisticated warships on the planet, the Type 45 air defense destroyer, HMS Dragon.
A billion-pound technological marvel.
Precisely. Heavily armed and tasked with providing a localized umbrella of invincibility over the region. The nation holds its breath, expecting this majestic warship to slice through the waves toward the Mediterranean at 30 knots.
Yeah, except it doesn't. It absolutely does not.
No, it does not.
HMS Dragon, the absolute pride of the fleet, the billion-pound floating fortress, is currently stuck in Portsmouth. And do you know why it's stuck? Because it is the weekend. The dockyard workers have clocked out. They have gone home for a Sunday roast. I mean, honestly, did anyone ever think the Royal Navy would have an out-of-office auto-reply set up for World War III?
Yes. Well, as deeply uncomfortable as it is to admit, the reality of the situation is incredibly sobering. To truly grasp the gravity of this logistical logjam, we have to meticulously break down the catalyst. We are in the thick of Operation Epic Fury. The United States and Israel struck Tehran on February 28th, resulting in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei.
Which is a massive, massive escalation. The whole region is a powder keg. And the intelligence community knew the shockwaves would hit Allied infrastructure.
They did. According to diplomatic and military sources, the U.S. had asked the U.K. about using sovereign bases to support operations against Iran as early as February 11th. So this buildup was not a secret. The Ministry of Defense had weeks of runway to prepare for potential blowback. Then, the Shahed 136 drone hits RAF Akrotiri on March 2nd. They were tracking it, and as we know, a low and slow loitering munition presents a completely different radar cross-section challenge compared to standard ballistic threats.
Right, it's basically a flying lawnmower.
Essentially, yes. But it breached the air defenses of a highly secure RAF base. The Cypriot government is understandably alarmed. Cypriots living near the base were advised to shelter, and families of UK service personnel are actively being moved off the base as a security precaution.
And the Cypriot government came out and publicly stated they were disappointed in the British response. Let's unpack that word, disappointed. In diplomatic circles, when a host nation hosting your sovereign base says they are disappointed while their airspace is being violated, that is diplomatic speak, for what on earth are your defense planners doing?
It is a severe rebuke.
And you know what makes it worse? Look at the immediate vicinity. While our billion-pound warship is tied to a dock waiting for Monday morning, the French immediately announced they were sending a Horizon-class frigate. The Italians deployed a FREM frigate to secure the maritime flanks. The Greeks sent 4 F-16s to Paphos International Airport. Our allies are swarming the area to protect our base while we are waiting for the weekend to finish.
Yeah, heavy sigh on that one. It is a stark contrast, undeniably. But we do have to look at the fiscal realities driving this. The Prime Minister goes on television on a Sunday night promising to scramble the HMS Dragon, but the ship simply couldn't leave. And the reason brings us to the private contractor, Serco Marine Services. In October 2025, the Ministry of Defense signed a new contract with Serco for in-port services at His Majesty's Naval Base, Portsmouth. Now, the Modi was under a strict, legally binding mandate from the Treasury to find £2.6 billion in in-year savings for the financial year. You cannot simply ignore a £2.6 billion mandate in a peacetime economy.
But to save money on the tugboats, we are talking about the primary projection of British sea power. You are telling me we can afford a billion-pound warship, but the operational bottleneck is the contract for the guys untying the ropes.
Well, it is a bit more complex than just untying ropes.
It is like telling an entire nation, sorry, we cannot defend you from incoming kamikaze drones because the guys who drive the tugboats and load the missiles only work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It is peak bureaucratic comedy.
I understand the instinct to laugh at the optics, but let's examine the muddied position here. In a peacetime framework, maintaining a 24/7 fully staffed surge capacity across all naval bases 365 days a year is fiscally ruinous. When the Treasury demands $2.6 billion in savings, you don't find that by cutting frontline deployments. You find it by optimizing base operations.
Optimizing, right.
Transitioning to a leaner support contract was a calculated risk based on the assumption that major sovereign deployments would have a recognizable geopolitical lead time.
A lead time. The U.S. asked about the bases on February 11th. The strike on Tehran was February 28th. How much more lead time do the bureaucrats in Whitehall need? The Prospect Union, which represents the engineers and tugboat workers at the naval base, literally warned them about this exact scenario.
Yes, the union's position is very well documented.
When this new cost-cutting contract was negotiated in October 2025, the union was fiercely opposed. They claimed that the new deal transitioned the base away from around-the-clock operational capacity to a standard weekday schedule that made 21 roles redundant. 17 highly specialized logistical personnel walked out the door in October. You cut the staff, you cut the hours, and then you act surprised when the ship cannot leave on a Sunday.
Mike Clancy, the General Secretary of the Prospect Union, issued a very sharp statement following the delay. He said, and I quote, "Our members warned when this contract was negotiated that it was based on the fantasy that conflict only occurs between 9 and 5 on weekdays and that cutting additional support would have serious consequences." He added, quite pointedly, conflict doesn't only occur between 9 and 5.
I mean, give that man a medal for stating the obvious. Who at the Ministry of Defense thought the Iranians or proxy militias in Iraq were going to check the Portsmouth dockyard operating hours before pressing the launch button? Oh, hold on, lads. It's Saturday night in Hampshire. Let's wait until Tuesday to start the war. It exposes a fundamental flaw in how we view defense contracting. We treat it like a regional delivery service.
The bureaucratic friction does run deeper, and this is where the policy implementation becomes highly problematic. According to several parliamentary reports we reviewed for this deep dive, the MO had implemented an overtime ban as a money-saving tweak to the servicing contract. This meant that when the crisis hit over the weekend, the Armed Forces Minister, Al Carnes, had to personally step in and intervene just to authorize weekend work and overturn the restriction.
Stop. Just stop for a second. Let's really think about the mechanics of what you just said. You are telling me we have a warship with a Samson radar system that can track a golf ball from 100 miles away, a ship designed to intercept supersonic ballistic missiles, but we cannot get a bloke to load ammunition on a Sunday without a government minister physically signing a permission slip to pay him overtime.
Wow.
Chain of command has been replaced by an HR department.
The authorization pathways were clearly not designed for a weekend scramble under the new contract structure. The union stated that workers were relying entirely on goodwill, volunteering their evenings and weekends just to get the vessel ready. They argued that a vital national security capability should not depend on staff goodwill. But to present the complete picture, Serco has vehemently rejected these claims regarding their operational readiness.
Oh, I'm sure their crisis communications team was working overtime, even if the dockyard wasn't. Let's hear the defense.
A Serco spokesperson stated that the contract's core working hours are actually 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., not 9 to 5, and that overtime and weekend arrangements are fully available and baked into the operational agreement when requested by the Navy. They insisted that they fulfilled every Royal Navy request on time and to the agreed standard, and called any suggestion that working patterns hindered HMS Dragon's departure completely untrue. The Ministry of Defense officially backed them up, stating all requests made to Serco were indeed fulfilled.
Right. They fulfilled the requests after the Armed Forces Minister had to personally intervene to authorize the overtime. It is all semantic gymnastics. Yes, we fulfilled the request on time once the request was finally approved by a minister who had to override our own cost-saving ban. It doesn't change the fact that the ship was sitting there while Cyprus was relying on French and Greek air cover.
We also have to acknowledge the technical reality of re-rolling a ship. It is an incredibly complex engineering feat. HMS Dragon had just come out of a massive maintenance period. Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes explained that the destroyer was previously being prepared for an entirely different operational purpose. You don't just turn the ignition key on a Type 45 and sail into a combat zone.
But what does re-rolling actually entail that takes days to accomplish while a crisis is actively unfolding?
It requires deep digital and physical reconfiguration. Take the Samsung multifunction radar, for instance. A Type 45 is primarily designed as an anti-aircraft and anti-missile platform, optimized to track high-performance, supersonic fighter jets and high-altitude ballistic threats. But a Shahed 136 drone is small, flies incredibly low to avoid ground-based radar, and is very slow.
So the radar doesn't actually see it.
Not easily. Their radar's cross-section parameters have to be meticulously tuned by technicians to pick out these specific loitering munitions amidst the heavy clutter of the littoral environment in the eastern Mediterranean. If you don't calibrate the system for a low radar cross-section, low-speed threat, the radar algorithms might filter it out as background noise or a flock of birds.
Okay, I can see the software calibration is vital, but they also had to physically load the ordnance, right?
Correct. The ship was positioned at the Upper Harbor Ammunitioning Facility, or UAF, in Portsmouth Harbor. Loading Sea Viper missiles, specifically the Aster 15 and Aster 30 interceptors, is a highly delicate, hazardous, and regulated process. You are loading highly explosive, complex munitions into vertical launch silos. It requires specialized crane operators, ordnance technicians, and strict safety cordons. Furthermore, there were reports from the dockyard of unfinished structural welding that had to be completed and inspected before the hull could safely handle the high seas and structural stresses of crossing the Bay of Biscay at speed.
I get that it's complicated, the engineering is immense, but you cannot tell me that this shouldn't have been initiated weeks ago. The geopolitical indicators were flashing red. The U.S. asked about the sovereign base areas in early February. Keir Starmer himself told the country to prepare for heightened tensions months ago. And yet the Mondi waits until a drone literally smashes into a hangar at Akrotiri to say, right then, better call the welders and start looting the Aster missiles. It is a completely reactive posture masquerading as strategic patience.
When you look at the broader context, the delayed deployment of HMS Dragon is perhaps just a symptom of a much deeper structural malaise within procurement and fleet management. The Royal Navy, historically the paramount seafaring force on the planet, theoretically possesses 6 Type 45 destroyers, 6 hulls to project air defense across the globe.
And how many of those 6 are actually capable of putting to sea right now?
According to a parliamentary question answered by Defense Minister Lord Coker in January 2026, the data shows only 3 are currently operational: HMS Dauntless, HMS Duncan, and HMS Dragon.
Half the fleet is unavailable during a global crisis.
And even that operational figure requires some technical nuance. HMS Defender and HMS Diamond are in deep refit. HMS Daring, the first-in-class, famously spent over 3,000 days out of service. 3,000 days. That is more than 8 years tied alongside.
It is an absolute tragedy for naval readiness.
But to understand why they are in deep refit, we must look forensically at the Power Improvement Project, or PIP. This isn't just routine maintenance. This is a £160 million retroactive engineering effort that is currently dictating the entire availability cycle of the surface fleet. When the Type 45s were originally procured and designed in the post-Cold War era, they were fitted with Rolls-Royce WR-21 gas turbines paired with Northrop Grumman intercooler and recuperator units. The engineering logic at the time was focused heavily on fuel efficiency, using a recuperation system to recirculate exhaust heat to save money on long global patrols.
Which sounds highly advanced and economically sound on paper, until you deploy it to the actual environments where modern conflicts happen.
Precisely. The thermodynamics failed. In environments like the Persian Gulf or the Eastern Mediterranean, where the ambient water temperature exceeds 28 degrees Celsius, the thermal management system simply could not cope. The intercoolers failed catastrophically. And when the gas turbines tripped and failed, the massive electrical load of the ship, particularly the immense power demands of that Samsung radar system, shifted entirely to the backup diesel generators.
Which weren't designed to carry the combat load of the entire ship.
They were entirely inadequate for that purpose. The result was a total electrical blackout. The ships were left dead in the water in active combat zones, weapons systems offline, propulsion offline, radar offline. It was an unacceptable vulnerability. So the mod was forced to initiate the PIP to literally cut into the hulls of all 6 destroyers, because they weren't built with modular engine replacement in mind, to remove the 2 old generators and install 3 Massive, reliable diesel generators capable of handling the entire electrical demand independently of the gas turbines.
And that takes years of dry dock time. HMS Daring took 8 years.
HMS Dragon was chosen for the specific Cyprus deployment precisely because it had just finished this crucial PIP upgrade in May 2025. It has the reliable power generation. HMS Duncan, while perhaps more sea-ready in terms of recent crew exercises, still operates with the original flawed propulsion system. The Navy command simply couldn't risk sending Duncan into the warm waters of the eastern Mediterranean, facing a potential drone swarm, only to have the power grid black out at the critical moment of interception.
But this exposes the brutal, unforgiving reality of our procurement numbers. Because we only have 6 ships, and because this massive engine replacement project is dragging on for years, the Navy has to resort to what they call stores robbing. This is my absolute favorite piece of bureaucratic jargon in the entire defense lexicon.
It is the official MADI term for cannibalization.
Yes. Cannibalizing critical components from one multi-billion-pound warship to make another one function. They took HMS Daring, parked it for 8 years, and just stripped it for parts like an old Honda Civic in a scrapyard. If a vital radar component or a cooling valve breaks on Dragon, they just unscrew it from Daring. It is humiliating for a Tier 1 military. We are penny-pinching our way to global irrelevance. You cannot project power when your supply chain strategy is stripping your own inactive ships.
The logistical math is indeed unforgiving, and it extends to the geographical realities of the deployment. Let's look at the transit calculus. The distance from Portsmouth to the waters off the sovereign base areas in Cyprus is roughly 3,000 to 3,400 nautical miles, depending on the exact routing through the Mediterranean. The Type 45 has a maximum dash speed of about 30 knots, but a sustained economical cruising speed of roughly 18 knots. Assuming they need to conserve fuel for sustained patrol operations once they arrive on station, a transit of 5 to 7 days is the standard planning figure.
So even if the dockyard workers loaded the missiles on a Monday morning, the ship isn't getting there until the following weekend. The drone strike happened days ago.
Which leaves a significant, highly visible defense gap. A gap that, as we discussed, our European allies have had to hastily fill. The UK's global ambition, as articulated by the Prime Minister, is being severely undercut by its logistical inertia and limited hull numbers.
But let's pause the operational doom and gloom for just a second, because amidst all this dockyard drama and spreadsheet management, there were some actual personnel in uniform doing their jobs incredibly well at the sharp end of the spear.
Yes, and we should absolutely highlight the genuine historic and military successes that occurred in the skies over the Middle East during this exact same time frame. While the surface fleet was dealing with contractual friction and structural welding, the Royal Air Force was making operational history.
The F-35s over Jordan.
Exactly. The MOD confirmed that RAF F-35B Lightning stealth fighters, which had been preemptively deployed to RAF Akrotiri last month in anticipation of these rising regional tensions, successfully engaged and destroyed hostile drones over Jordan. This is a monumental milestone in military aviation. It marks the very first time an RAF F-35 has destroyed a target in a live operational mission.
And they utilized ASFR missiles to achieve those kills.
Advanced short-range air-to-air missiles.
Yes.
A highly sophisticated infrared homing missile costing approximately 200,000 pounds per unit.
Okay, there's a tiny bit of tactical irony there that we have to acknowledge.
Right.
You are shooting down a cheap, mass-produced Iranian kamikaze drone that probably cost 20 grand to bolt together in a warehouse using a 200,000-pound missile launched from a 100 million-pound fifth-generation stealth fighter. The cost-exchange ratio is brutal, but from an operational standpoint, a hit is a hit. The pilots executed the interception flawlessly.
The success was also highly coordinated across multiple platforms and regions. A Royal Air Force Typhoon, operating out of Qatar with the joint UK-Qatar 12 Squadron, also successfully intercepted and destroyed an Iranian drone heading toward Qatari airspace. Furthermore, British ground-based counter-drone teams deployed in Iraq successfully neutralized uncrewed aerial systems that were actively threatening coalition air bases in Iraqi airspace.
It proves that the personnel, the rigorous training pipelines, and the tactical capabilities are world-class. When the military is actually untethered from the bureaucracy and allowed to fight, they perform brilliantly.
And the response from the Fleet Air Arm wasn't entirely grounded either. The deployment package designed for the Cyprus theater includes 2 Royal Navy Wildcat HMA-2 helicopters.
The drone busters, that is what they are calling them now.
That is precisely their operational nickname. These helicopters are armed with Martlet missiles. The Martlet is a lightweight, precision-guided multi-role missile that is significantly cheaper and lighter than the massive Aster missiles carried in the vertical launch silos of the destroyers. A single Wildcat helicopter can carry up to 20 Martlet missiles simultaneously. They are highly agile, incredibly accurate against small moving targets, and provide a highly effective, cost-efficient alternative to swatting low-cost kamikaze drones out of the sky. The tactical plan is for HMS Dragon, once on station, to utilize these Wildcats to provide a mobile, airborne, forward defense screen around the airspace of Cyprus.
Look, the aviation successes across the board are genuinely impressive. The RAF and the Fleet Air Arm are clearly doing the heavy lifting in this crisis. But I cannot help myself. Given everything we've discussed about Portsmouth, I have to add a caveat. All of this high-tech aerial dominance, the F-35s, the Wildcats, it's all fantastic.
Yeah.
Assuming the pilots aren't on their lunch break.
Oh, wow, you just couldn't resist, could you?
I couldn't, because the contrast is just too insane to ignore. You have fighter pilots pulling high G forces in the stratosphere, making split-second, life-or-death decisions to shoot down incoming threats over Jordan. And meanwhile, back in Portsmouth, someone in a high-vis jacket is checking their watch, saying, "Oh, 5 p.m. on a Friday, time to put the welding torch down, let the Mediterranean fend for itself until Monday." It is strategic schizophrenia.
Which perfectly synthesizes the core theme of all these disparate sources. The political grandstanding, the union grievances, the engineering nightmares of the PIP, and the genuine battlefield successes. What we are looking at is a massive structural chasm.
A chasm between the government's rhetoric on the world stage and the reality of a peacetime, heavily outsourced, cost-cut supply chain. Prime Minister Starmer and multiple administrations before him project an image of global Britain, a nation capable of rapid response, of honoring its 1960 Treaty of Guarantee to Cyprus, of projecting hard power thousands of miles from home at a moment's notice.
And the diplomatic weight that carries is enormous.
But the budget only pays for a 9-to-5, Monday to Friday military apparatus. You can have the most advanced Sea Viper missile system in the known universe. You can have a Samson radar that can track incoming threats with pinpoint precision. It means absolutely fundamentally nothing if the physical ship is tied to a dock with thick ropes, waiting for a weekday shift manager to authorize the crane operators to load the ammunition.
The Type 45 destroyer is, without hyperbole, a world-class defensive asset. The Sea Viper system can launch 8 missiles in under 10 seconds and simultaneously guide up to 16 missiles to multiple targets. But that pointy end of the spear requires a massive, complex ecosystem of logistical support to get it to the fight. When you outsource that ecosystem to private contractors under strict financial constraints, when you cut 21 key logistical roles to save money on the margins, and when your fleet is so numerically small that half of it is always undergoing deep surgery to fix original design flaws, you sacrifice the very agility that global power projection demands.
You sacrifice credibility. How do you think our adversaries look at this operational delay? You think intelligence analysts in Iran or Russia or China aren't reading the Daily Telegraph or the Jerusalem Post? They see the headlines. British Warship delayed by 9-to-5 contract. It is an open invitation to test our boundaries. If I'm an adversary planning an asymmetric strike, I'm taking a very specific note. Next time, launch the attack on a bank holiday weekend. The British logistical chain will be totally paralyzed.
It certainly raises profound questions about national resilience. As former UK Defence Attaché John Foreman stated in his analysis of the situation, the Modi has consistently been behind the power curve and is constantly scrambling to catch up to geopolitical realities. He characterized it as a failure of planning, of intelligence utilization, and of strategic foresight. They knew the Epic Fury operations were escalating throughout February. They knew the F-35s were deploying to Akrotiri, yet the vital naval asset was not prepositioned in the Mediterranean.
Because it couldn't be. Because we don't have enough operational holes, and the ones we do have are chained to a bureaucratic process that treats national defense like a regional logistics company delivering parcels on a business day schedule.
In the end, HMS Dragon will eventually sail. It will clear the NAB Tower, enter the English Channel, and make its week-long transit to the eastern Mediterranean. It will arrive on station, and it will undoubtedly provide an impenetrable shield of air defense over RAF Akrotiri. The crew, the radar operators, and the engineers will perform their duties with the utmost professionalism.
First thing Monday morning. Grab a copy first.
Welcome to the modern military. And imagine for a second walking into your boss's office during a company-ending crisis and saying, you can't help because it's a Saturday. We have spent this time examining the incredibly visible, high-profile delay of a billion-pound warship. But if peacetime budget cuts, union disputes, and standard business hours can completely ground a premier military asset during a sudden international crisis, what else is vulnerable? What other hidden bureaucratic bottlenecks and 9-to-5 contracts are silently underpinning the critical infrastructure that you rely on every single day? From the power grid's emergency response teams to civilian cyber defense networks to the logistics of our medical supply chains, are we as a society treating our most vital security requirements like a standard corporate desk job? It is certainly something to seriously ponder the next time you hear a politician promise a swift and decisive response to the unexpected.